How about yourself?
I'm doing all right.
You dodging the coronavirus?
So far, so good.
Good. Keep up the good work. We will too.
All right, I want to welcome everyone to the Education Continuation Task Force on April 6, 2020. I think everyone is able to show participants in their teams feature. And so, Karen, if it's okay with you, we can just dispense with reading off who's present. I think folks can see that. If you click on the people icon, um, it will show all the participants that have signed on, and you can scroll down and see. And I think we're also going to be able to have Lieutenant Governor Secretary Coleman with us today as well, and we welcome her. And her office has been participating this entire time with us, and we appreciate the partnership with them and the cabinet. I won't take long. We have a lot of agenda items today. Of course, we continue to focus at KDE on the themes of educate, feed, and support. And I know that's what school districts and all of your organizations are doing as well. Those are the three primary areas of need across the state in the education world. And we all continue to do that and place a focus on that during this unprecedented time. Today, we have several agenda items. We're going to be talking about some fatigue issues. I know we've talked about that on previous meetings, but that continues to be an issue now that we definitely know we're getting into the 5th and 6th week of NTI for most districts. And then we also have some districts that are starting out with NTI this week, one of them being Jefferson County. They took several days and very worthwhile days to plan for this. And so we have some districts just starting out. We're also going to be talking about principal feedback, and we thank Rhonda Caldwell from the Kentucky Association of School Administrators for that. We're going to have a civics test update, and then also some discussions about communications. So, Karen, I'll turn it over to you, and we can get started.
Okay, I just want to remind everybody that this is being recorded. And at the end of the meeting, when we get into communications, I'll show you exactly where you can go to find the recordings of past meetings. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya Crum to talk about student and family fatigue during NTI.
Hi, good afternoon. It's good to talk to you all today. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little about what we are doing at KET to try to help with that fatigue issue for families. And just to give you a quick overview, I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and we'll see how that goes based on some of our last experiences. Karen, I'm going to assume you can see it.
We can see it.
Great.
Yep.
So at KET, we've been looking at this learn at home kind of positioning to talk to parents and families. Of course, at KET, we've been doing kind of distance learning support for 50 years. So we've been in classrooms in a variety of ways. But now, as we're looking at this this new way of learning, we wanted to make sure that parents had easy access to these resources. So I'm going to start just by showing you a couple of websites. It's ket.org/learn-at-home, and this is the page you're seeing here. This is divided into an opportunity for families and for educators. We'll talk about educators in a moment, but I wanted to focus on families right now. So we've divided it into these grade levels, pre-K through 3, 4th through 8th, and 9th through 12th. And we're trying to give parents and caregivers an opportunity to see what it's like to help your kids and enhance the learning that they're seeing on TV. And so we're giving tips and a variety of things there. But when you look at the pre-K through 3, you can see we've divided it up to really talk about what are the games and apps available for kids that you can download, but then you don't have to use your data or Wi-Fi to play most of those games there. And we've given other examples of things you can do with your kids while you're home, just keeping them engaged, some printable cutout cards, discussion cards parents can use with kids. and some other activities we're trying to keep fresh there for children and for families. But and we're doing that for 9th through 12th grade as well. So I guess it's always easy for me to demonstrate PBS Kids content because that's what you see on our air much of the day on our main channel. Well, you did before last week. But many of our resources in PBS Learning Media, which is an online repository of content that students can access anytime, anywhere. It does require internet access, but it is a full repository of resources that the David Couch's team there at KDE, as well as other district support staff, have really helped get the word out about this resource. We've been using it in partnership with KDE for, I believe, over 10 years now, and we have incredible usage throughout the state. And so it's an opportunity for parents to kind of get a feel for what their kids are learning in school and how you take some of these video segments, maybe from Nova or Nature, and make them educational. And so we've tried to link to some of those resources here as well for families to do some co-viewing with their kids. So I'm going to switch for a moment and talk to you about the educator side. So if you were to click on that educator button on the Learner homepage, you're going to find these resources. And this is really the place where we're focused on educators. And we've been, David Cook was gracious enough to get these resources out back on March 16th to all of the districts who are doing NTI or interested in NTI so that we could help them understand how some of these online resources could be utilized. And I told you all, I guess 2 weeks ago, maybe, that we were going to begin our on-air broadcast. So I wanted to focus a moment on that. Our on-air broadcast began last Monday, and it is a 10-hour broadcast schedule. Let me show you what that looks like. I think you can see it here. You're not going to be able to read all the words, I know. But as you can see, that green band from 7 to 9 a.m. is focused on the pre-K through 3rd grade. From 9 to 3, we're doing some mostly middle school, kind of 4th through 8th grade content. And then from 3 to 5, the 9th through 12th grade content. And these are full-length PBS programs: Nova, History Detectives, The Amazing Human Body, The Great American Read, a variety of programs there that have been aligned to educational standards that we know kids are going to learn math, science, social studies, and language arts content from these programs. And so for those kids who are at home without a reliable internet access, we've put these programs on broadcast. Our hope is that the school districts that are doing NTI could say to their kids, we have these learning connections here, reflections worksheets, discussion question cards, and I'll show you, like, one of those reflections sheet might look like this, that we could include in the paper packets that are going out. What did you learn from this episode? How does the episode connect to what you've already learned in class? Or after watching, what do you want to learn more about? Just to get the kids continuing to think about how everything around them is a learning opportunity, and particularly these programs that we're airing from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day. And so as you can see, there's a broadcast schedule. And then for those teachers who want to use these broadcast programs in their NTI, we've already aligned each program to some online activities. So for teachers, they can use these activities that are in PBS Learning Media and assign them to their students who are watching the program, and then additional activities to follow up on what they've learned in the broadcast. So we've tried to make these resources pretty turnkey so that educators could utilize them in places where they may not be able to get to their kids through online means. We know that teachers are working really hard to get the content out, to get those phone calls going, to talk to every child as often as possible. But KET wanted to be able to support that learning with online resources, but also with our broadcast reach, because we know that KET is reaching out to kids across the state. And we're hopeful that these resources prove to be really useful. We're hearing from teachers who are so glad to have this additional content available to them, but also just the continued tips that we're giving about using PBS Learning Media, which has all of these nice integrations to Google Classroom and to Remind, and all of the other resources there that they may need. But our KET education consultants are on deck and ready to help. We've been receiving help requests and have been doing some webinars and one-on-one assistance with teachers and districts, and we're happy to continue to do that. So with that, I'll kind of stop, and I know we've got lots of things to hear about today, but I appreciate the opportunity to share those resources out. Oh, the last thing I didn't mention is about our forum that we're doing tonight. So Commissioner Brown is going to be on that forum for families. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on KET tonight. And we're going to be focusing on how to help families get through this crisis together. Not just from the educational standpoint, but also from the mental health standpoint as well. And so I think we will have a wonderful lineup of guests who will be very distant from one another and participating in that forum. But we're excited to be able to offer that support as well. So we'd be happy for y'all to share that out with your networks. Again, it's tonight at 8 p.m. We've been tweeting about it on social media, so you're welcome to reshare any of those.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tanya.
Sure.
Okay, the guiding question that we had on here was, do you have other resources when it comes to dealing with fatigue during NTI? So I'm just going to throw that out to the group. If there's anything that you have, because we are looking for better ways to communicate, more ways to communicate with everyone in the education community on where they can go. This is definitely a big one, I know, not just for kids, but for parents. So I think it's really great. So if there are other sources or that you all know of and would like to share, now's a great time.
And one thing I would add, and Tanya, we want to thank you and KET for all your wonderful resources. I think this should be the first place that we look to is KET. I know we have a lot of other offerings out there, digital platforms and others, but particularly with the wide reach of KET, I think that shouldn't be lost on us, that folks can still use a simple digital antenna and receive, I think, 4 to 5 KET channels. Which is huge, particularly for areas and for homes that do not have internet access. And the other thing I would like to kind of guide the conversation to is, while we're using KET now for an option for learning, what does that look like over the summer? Because we know we're going to have reason for guidance, and particularly in reading and math for students through extended school services and other programs. However, you know, we are looking at the possibility of that also having to be done through digital means if the social distancing is not eased by that time. And so I think that is also something we need to be discussing right now.
Yeah, I will just say the summer, that summer slide that we talked about and how we're going to get kids ready and keep them ready for next fall is definitely on our radar. So we've been talking with other stations about that as well, what resources we might have to bring to the table. So we're happy to continue in those conversations for sure.
Make sure you unmute your line if you have a comment.
Karen, I'd also add, anybody that has a question, they can just type raise hand in the new message type, and that would be, you know, they'll allow you to be recognized.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, David. All right, Kevin,
That's
should
a
we move on?
well, that's a testament to KET right there, because everybody knows how good they are, and okay, just keep doing what you're doing,
All
right?
right, I'll take it. Thank you very much.
I have fond memories, as I know probably everybody on this call that are from Kentucky, about KET, and I can remember the big television stands in the classrooms that, with the sign, tip over hazard, and the big, huge tube TVs. But when the teacher went to turn on KET, we always got excited, just because we always knew it was just great programming. And then there was also excitement when you came home every day to watch Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, and 3-2-1 Contact. And I have those memories today, and I can remember little jingles and songs and things that we all do about what we learned. And so the fact that that's still going on, and it's more robust than ever, and you're on 5 different digital channels, is just such a huge resource for Kentucky. And I think many Kentuckians don't realize we have one of the premier, if not the premier, educational television service in the country. Not every state has the same level of. There's not a there's public broadcasting all over the country, but they're all not like KET. So that's just a testament to how the dedication to KET over the years, and it's a treasure of the Commonwealth. So I want to thank you all for your continued work in this area. We're going to.
Kevin, I did want to mention that we obviously we've had a long relationship in our office with KET, and part of the package that we put together for all school districts with our full suite of digital distance learning tools is what's available through KET. So everything, whether it's online or through KET, we have in one place for people to see.
Yeah, that's great.
And Marty Park has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you so much. If I could also just briefly mention, we had partnered with KET through this past year as well, Tanya and her education team, to help provide professional learning experiences for our digital learning coaches all across the state. Such a great partnership, and one of the results of that we mentioned, I had in the chat the very first time we met, was the network that has been built across the state with education and school and district leaders to come together to help from a coaching perspective of how to better use digital tools and resources. And so Tanya's team helped us put that together. And one of the outputs that I'll share in the chat again is just those catalogs of digital and distance resources that our schools and our teachers and school leaders can leverage as well.
Thanks, Marty.
We have a comment.
Mary Rubel,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was
Karen.
just gonna. Okay, so Mary Rubel has a comment. We're schooling at home. One frustration is getting messages about lessons from different instructors during the day. Often there's a need to clarify directions, which is fine, but sometimes the clarification comes after the assignment is complete. If districts can give guidance to teachers about minimizing communication or getting it done by a certain time each day, that will help. I agree, as the parent of 2 high schoolers.
If I could also step in there from a coaching perspective on leveraging digital platforms and communication and collaboration platforms. We've been for some time now issuing and working through that guidance of our districts and schools selecting a common platform, which we think is extremely valuable, as opposed to as opposed to individual teachers coming up with a different plan. As a parent of 5 and seeing a lot of communications come in different ways as well, it is. You're exactly right. That's well said, and part of that is developing common strategies that win. Common strategies that work really well at the school and district level.
One comment about that too, to caveat onto Marty's, this is Amanda, is in the guidance that'll come out today around instruction and grading, there is a component at the bottom that talks about communication. Who do you communicate with? How do you communicate with them? In hopes of really helping districts think through their strategy around communication and when, and is it strategic and intentional and timely? And that's not an easy thing to do. It's something that has to be really intentionally coordinated, but just to share that as well.
Thanks, Amanda.
To
Any
go
other
back to, I would just say
comment?
to go back to Mary's comment, and she's coming from a unique perspective. I think she's actually schooling at home as well as with her role at KEA. So she has the different perspectives, probably some frustration on the part of parent, and then some frustration on the part of teachers about maybe needing some more guidance. So Kelly Foster and David Cook, if y'all could flag that, if that's not already in our NTI guidance about that communication issue and timing issue on assignments, if we could maybe add that to the guidance.
And Kevin, if I could just jump in, this is Tanya again. I'm also schooling an 8th grader and a senior in high school. And what's been interesting, I'm in Jessamine County, and so we've been doing NTI for many, many years. And so I realize that we are kind of a step ahead, and that's been a bonus for us. But this long-term NTI, what our district has put into place following spring break this week, is kind of guidance about which classes are giving assignments on which days. And that really took a load off from me and from my kids. Particularly, I know it's easier in middle and high school to say first, second, and third block on Mondays and Wednesdays, and fourth, fifth, and sixth block on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Friday's kind of your day to make sure you've caught everything up. And that has done a lot to just kind of relieve this pressure of 6 classes of content every single day. I think in this extended NTI period, the kids are still getting the quality, they're still getting that good instruction, but it's not in a more complicated fashion. I don't know. So that I've seen that well, I think it's going to work. This is just Monday, but I guess we'll see. But it seems good.
All right, Kevin, we ready to move on to the next agenda item?
I think so. The only thing I would add, I would like maybe about 5 minutes of discussion about what are the thoughts about the value of continuing. You know, some districts are going to race to get to 1062 and then they're going to go home, and that's certainly fine. We have one district that I'm aware of that will probably be ready to have their 1062 on May 4th. I think there's another one right there with them. And then we've got, Jefferson, for example, started NTI this week. They will be scheduled to finish up June 3rd. There's value to going home around May 4th, particularly the Dawson Springs, for example. They've had several cases in their community. That might be a consideration. On the other hand, we know that we are refining and constantly changing and reevaluating how we're delivering some services to students, particularly those with IEPs. And so the longer we're in, assuming the public health side of it stays relatively constant and the same, there's value into going a little longer. For example, I ran into a teacher at a feeding site on Friday, and she mentioned in passing that she was having trouble. She was a reading interventionist. She really wanted to use some technology, kind of a whiteboard technology, but that could be done virtually with her student on writing, and she was having trouble on some of the platforms. And so we were able to connect her with OET folks in Marty Park to assist her in that. But my point is, that we're still figuring out some of these things as we go along. And so there will be some benefit to the districts that are going a little longer because they're figuring some of these things out. On the other hand, we have the fatigue setting in. And so maybe just a brief discussion about what are thoughts about that. Then what does that look like in any kind of a transition over to summer work, to enrichment programs, to any type of intervention programs over the summer.
We've got a comment from David Johnson regarding districts that may finish early in May. How many days will remain on teacher contracts that must be worked after the 1,062 hour requirement has been met for students?
David, that's a good question. We actually had that discussion about that on our leadership team meeting this morning, and particularly about the district I mentioned, and how are those contract days coinciding with the 1062? I'm not sure. Obviously, there are opportunities for teachers to do virtual PDs or things like that, or planning days to finish out contracts, but that is an issue. It could be an opportunity as well if you had extra days, because next school year will look it will be much different than it is this year because of the students having summer slide and all the other issues associated, and social emotional issues that may carry over as a result of the year potentially not going back to in-person school. So I think that's a good question. I don't know what that looks like at the average district. Any other comments? And Eric Kennedy has a good comment about that districts that are meeting the 1062 soon opens up opportunity for districts to shift their focus of their work to district-led PD and then plan for next year catch-up work. He said I stole his comment. Thank you, Eric. And then the other issue, and this is all I'm sure in the back of everyone's mind, is the possibility of a COVID-19 surge, or a leveling off and then another peak at some point during the year next year.
There's a comment from David Johnson. Can teachers participate in PD on NTI days if those days are not part of the 4 days in the regular district calendar?
David Cook, can you take that one?
Hey, Kevin. I'm not sure. I also probably need some assistance from the folks who deal with the teacher contract and the 180 whatever days. Normally, if you're counting PD as a day in the calendar, it has to be a different day from an instructional day. So that would be my first response would be you can't do both on one day, but somebody else want to assist me with that? That's the way I've always read the school calendar law.
Hi, this is Kelly chiming in here. I agree with you, David, but I also think, there's been lots of conversation out there. If we do get to a point where they've met their 1,062 and you have teachers that still are under contract, what types of things are you going to do with them then? So I think that would be a great time for online professional development, online PLCs, planning for remediation and intervention programs for the summer. What do the first 6 weeks of school look like? So, I think that's something that superintendents really need to talk about with their local board, but I don't think KDE would be against using teacher contract days to continue teacher education and planning for the future.
Kelly, this is Dave Johnson, just kind of explaining that a little bit further. It seems like we could potentially allow teachers to do PD on NTI days if it's not part of that required 4 days. Like if I've already got my 4 days in, but I want to do some additional PD on an NTI day when I'm not working with kids, when I've got my stuff done for the day and I've got some time and I can do some online stuff, or maybe have some kind of other meeting or whatever, but I've already got my 4 days in, so I'm not in essence double dipping, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me, and I'm going to let Amanda chime in since PD is really in her office, but I would expect if a district met their 1,062 and finished that up, but still had days on their teacher contracts, that they would definitely want to be providing professional learning for their teachers for the rest of those contract days.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. I'm even thinking about before the 1,062 hours are filled up, if I've got NTI and I've got 2 or 3 hours where I'm not actually interfacing with kids, but there's something that I can work on for professional development. I guess that's what my question is at, because I get after the 1,062 hours that you got to fill those days, and that's a great time to use professional learning to start filling that gap in for the next year. I'm even wondering if you could do it before then, if teachers had time during the day on their NTI days.
Yeah, and this is Amanda Kelly. David and I kind of talked really briefly about this morning on email, and I told him I just wanted to double check, which is why we had reached out to Todd to make sure, but I'm in complete agreement. I mean, this is the time to really start planning and thinking ahead how we approach next fall, regardless if the kids come back in May or if they don't. This has been a massive transition for them and a great opportunity. This is also why we are pulling together all of our professional learning opportunities, as many as we can, that are offered virtually, and we are loading them on the professional learning bulletin board daily. There's lots of offers out there, not just for certified, but also for classified, that are available for folks to be using their time to make the most of it. To David's point, there's a lot of need out there and a lot of planning to be done, and thinking through what the approach should be. And so I told David this morning, I completely am in agreement with him as long as that was allowable. And it sounds like that it is, but I do think it's a good time for districts to really take advantage of allowing their staff to really dig in, learn, grow, make plans, and prepare for students when they arrive.
So Amanda, based on what you said, being sensitive to not overloading teachers, because we're all dealing with that right now, but being sensitive to that, if a district wanted to start some of that on NTI days before the 1,062 hours are up, they could do that. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding, unless Todd Allen or legal tells me different. Yes, and as long as it doesn't obviously it's not during the time when they're providing direct service to students. Yes, that's my understanding. Anybody on legal team to refute that, please do now. I would appreciate that. But yes, David, that's what I understand.
Okay, thanks.
And Amanda, looking into that and doing some research on that, and we'll provide some written guidance also that we can provide out to school districts on that specific topic.
And the other thing
Thank
to
you,
keep in
Todd.
mind is the 1062 is what you need to get to by under Senate Bill 177 by June 12th. You can go beyond 1062 if you want to. You can get more hours than that. And the General Assembly seems to indicate that we want you out of school by June 12th. But if you're hitting 1062 in early May and you believe it's beneficial to go several more days for whatever reason, and the situation with the virus is somewhat stable or the same as it is now, and you have relatively few cases in your community and that's not impacting your delivery of services, you're certainly able to do that. That's obviously going to be a local decision. And there's several comments on the chat feature about the unknowns about when we'll get back in buildings. That's one of I really like the approach that the administration is taking in Kentucky, because we're planning for the worst but hoping for the best, and making these decisions in 2 to 3 week increments using the data in Kentucky. There's still a small window of hope out there, and the governor has said that we could get back into school at some point this year. It's very, very small, but there's that possibility. So, other states have taken other approaches by just going ahead and canceling outright. But I think this approach is working well for us. And we obviously have districts that are finishing early and some that'll go into June, and we'll have to see how that plays out. But we also have of course, Senate Bill 177 giving us the tools we need, and couple that with the governor's executive order authority to be able to take care of whatever happens, take care of that for districts.
And Kevin, we're seeing some interesting things happen in those states that are just ending for the whole year. And I think this is a very wise, measured approach. I know having this committee and thinking about some of the bigger issues have been a big deal. Here in Georgia, they canceled for the rest of the year, but there wasn't a lot of guidance, frankly, to teachers about, how are we going to do grades? How are we going to, when, my wife, who's a teacher, got a message yesterday. How do we turn our books back in? Little things that we have that people aren't thinking about. And I would even encourage us to think about a progression of communication. We've seen some school districts here in Georgia and in some other states where the district office made an announcement but didn't include the administrators before the announcement. And then they're caught flat-footed, and subsequently the teachers are caught flat-footed, which ends up creating stress everywhere from the principal through the parents. So you may even want to think about putting some guidance out about, and that's a great thing about this committee. I mean, again, kudos for this, because we could put that communication together, but I think it's more than communication. It's actually communication steps as well, because it's really causing a lot of stress in several of our states that have chosen to just eliminate school for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm also hearing the same from my 3 nieces who are public school students in Fulton County, Georgia. So that dovetails in with what I heard last night on our Zoom family call. All right, Karen, if you want to proceed with the agenda, I think we've gotten some good information on that subject.
And we'll capture the things that are in chat in the notes. So I've been reading through there. It seems like we're kind of talking and chatting at the same time. So just we'll get those in there. The next agenda item is principal feedback regarding current high school credits earned. And Rhonda Caldwell is going to start off on that topic. Rhonda?
Okay, thank you. Amanda is going to tag team this with me, and I believe she's going to share the document for us.
Yes. Give me just a second and I'll pull that up.
So last week, Amanda presented to the group the question about high school graduation requirements and presented whether it was 15 or 22. And so we were able to take the question and pose it to all of the high school principals in the state of Kentucky. We actually asked them 2 questions. One was about requirements. The second was about graduation ceremony suggestions in light of perhaps a reimagined world as it relates to COVID-19. So we actually have 260 principals in our database. So it's going to be off about 3. But we were able to confirm that all 260 received the survey. And we were able to confirm that 65 or 25% of the 260 did respond to it. The remaining 75%, they didn't see it, didn't open it. Perhaps it was due to the short time window, or possibly going to junk or that other folder. But we do know with the data that we have that all of the geographical areas of the state and the high school populations are represented, and that's going to be from our largest to our smallest districts. And so Amanda, if you could scroll to the graph, we can make this pretty quick.
Are you able to see that, Rhonda?
I am. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So
sure.
This graph basically gives you the breakdown on the responses as it relates to the question of if you have to choose between one or the other, where do you fall? And so as you can see, 55% of our folks said we want the 22 credits, and 45% said that we would like to go with the 15 credit option. And above this graph is a statement from Bob Bennett, who is the high school principal and also KASA's president-elect. And basically, he goes on to say that, that this is a fair representation of what he would expect if all 257 actually responded to the survey. And some comments that we found. So Amanda, if you would go to the next page, there's going to be a blue highlighted section.
Are you looking at this page or the next one?
The next page. I'm sorry,
Okay.
that would be, yes.
Yeah,
right
that's
there.
your option.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so there you can see a little bit of detail about option 1 with 22 credits. And
Sorry.
a few of the comments that are basically just summarized for you. And so the folks in the 22 credit category, they really felt like this, that seniors have completed multiple electives at this point, and that those who need credit are working toward required or pathway type credits, and some concern about ATC benchmarks. Another comment that I thought was really wise was this allows for equity, and it does respect the student work, and this was about keeping the electives in. And then another group giving actually even a principal group conversation that because we've already completed 3 grading periods this year, that NTI should be used to report a student's final grade, enhancing or bolstering it if it's helpful, but not penalizing. And most importantly, maintaining flexibility. And when you look at that group of 45% preferring 15 credits, you can see there they have some comments as well. And they're really bringing out the reality for us, a lot of our kids who are working to make ends meet for the family, picking up extra hours, and also recognizing senioritis is an issue for some students. And they ask that question, can we justify denying graduation due to an incomplete elective when core courses are complete? So looking through a different lens, but equally we're a 55-45 split. And from the very time that we began checking data, at the first check after 24 hours, it was a 55-45 split. And so at the end of day 2, or that 48-hour period, it did stay the 55-45 split. And so if you go down to the second survey question, which talks a little bit about graduation ceremonies, and you can see there are 4 points that we've made that kind of summarize the data and give the top 4 findings. And 50 of our 65 respondents responded to this question. And you can see that virtual graduation is the preferred method or recommendation by half the group. And drive-through ceremonies received the second number of votes with 17% responding, as did a delayed ceremony date, received 17%. And then a smaller number of folks, a modified graduation, while adhering to the CDC guidelines, was the 4th most popular option given. And we do have one district that's already announced that they will be hosting a modified graduation date. And so in thinking through the data that we received, Bobby Bennett, our president-elect, actually gave these next 2 paragraphs considerations. So you see there the governor, Commissioner Brown, and KDE perhaps preparing some acceptable practice documents, because the intent here is a really good one, but the concern for safety for everyone would be the challenge. And the page that Amanda just moved us to shows the actual breakdown of all of the recommendations given. And then the very last section, the final conclusions drawn from this data. We're a unique state with 172 very different school districts. So this data is not surprising at all. But if a single option is required for high school graduation requirements, it's most likely that option 1 with 22 credits to include the electives as presented would receive the highest amount of votes. And in terms of a graduation ceremony, it's clear that there's no easy answer, and that a high school graduation, it's a significant milestone to mark completion of one's entry into the adult world. So all of our principals, with the exception of one, agrees that a ceremony of some type is needed. And so the final statement on our conclusions here is that when we consider the vast differences in resources among our high schools, flexibility is key to meeting the needs of every individual student that we serve. So we appreciate the opportunity to be able to bring our principal's voice into the conversation. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Rhonda, very much. So I'm going to pull up and show you some draft guidance that we have prepared based on this. I got to talk to Rhonda last week about this, and we discussed feedback, some preliminary feedback. We've also heard a lot from many of you all calling me last week or emailing, honestly concerned about lowering the bar and really making it a blanket when it may not need to be a blanket change. So it's definitely, we can discuss that further. And I do appreciate Rhonda and KASA taking the time to solicit additional feedback from specific high school principals. That's really appreciated. The student advisory also gave feedback. So I'll walk you through really briefly the feedback around, or the document that came out of the discussion that started last Monday, and that has evolved through all the different discussions we've had literally in the past week on multiple meetings and phone calls. So on the screen, hopefully you're able to see, this is just pertaining to how we deal with the senior class of 2020. We have other guidance that'll come out today on instruction and grading procedures and mental health and well-being, but this is specific to our seniors because this is the group that's leaving us first. And the time is clicking away, whether students come back in May or whether, excuse me, they don't. We want to be able to provide guidance, and this is the structure of how we've set it up. So in just the beginning just shows the regulations that pertain to graduation, how we really want our districts to focus on seniors right now, not just seniors, clearly our students, but that really for those who are on target and those who are not, this is what you would be doing anyway, or districts would be doing anyway, and to really see where those who may be struggling, is it due to lack of access, or a program being suspended, or needing to be in person at that location, whatever that may be, or is it truly senioritis that's kicked in? But that's the important part of relationship with students and districts taking the responsibility of really reaching out to the individuals. The other thing you'll notice, I'm going to scroll and I apologize if it makes you dizzy, is that when we make these recommendations for consideration for districts to consider the questions that we're posing, because it's ultimately your decision, is that we have said that really meaningful thought should be given to each one of these considerations. We really want you to think through in these scenarios that we're providing is what's working and what's not. How do you know? What information is coming? Is it a few? Or is it the majority? Is it whatever it may be? Really think deeply about, we're encouraging districts to think deeply about what's working, what's not. What are the needs? And how do you address those? What are the challenges? And that's very specific to your districts or your region. And then what resources or next steps are needed for overcoming those challenges? And that's something we have on each one of these, because we're not telling you to mandate each one of these. What we're saying is in your decision making, think through these details that you may not have thought about before. And we really got so much good feedback on this. And so our team has crafted this based on the feedback of many of you from the task force, many principals or superintendents or co-op directors who've really reached out and said, I don't think you quite hit the mark yet. What about this? And so we're really trying to refine this and make it a powerful and helpful document. You'll also see the requirement on here is the 704 KAR 3305. And you're going to see then we have listed questions. Should local boards of education consider waiving local graduation requirements? Some of our districts require the ILP to be complete. Do you really want to prohibit a student from graduating if they're not able to access their ILP because they can't come to the building or they don't have access? So you have to look at your individual requirements that you've put in addition to the minimum requirements. I'll come back to the 15 versus 22 in just a minute. How can local schools and districts ensure students who are not on track to graduate receive additional support? Something we were just talking about. Has the local board chosen to award performance-based credit is established in the existing local performance-based credit system. Many of you have the performance-based policies in your districts. Have you considered how that's being used or not? And we just basically walk you through these considerations. You're also going to notice that we have on here the civics test requirement, and we've listed that that has been waived for the 1920 school year. And so we have in here brief language with a link to the waiver on that. You can see that students do not have to have that requirement to graduate this year, and it's this year only. You can see the actual language of the waiver, and we are incredibly appreciative of the timeliness from Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Jacqueline Coleman, and of course Commissioner Brown, of really working through this. Todd Allen did a fabulous job drafting the waiver to get just-in-time support on this. The other piece, you'll see the next one, is the early high school graduation program. Again, a waiver on this for juniors. This is their last chance to graduate early if they've met ACT benchmark, but they were not able to take the EOCs. The EOCs are waived. And so this language is in here. It's identifying the statute that is being waived and specifically who it's waived for. And then you also have grades for seniors and Keys Awards. So this is information that came from Becky Gilpatrick last week. She was on our phone call with the superintendent, very helpful. And we posed a question as how local decisions around school and district grading policies will impact GPAs in the awarding of keys. We've included the keys GPA calculation scenarios that Becky Gilpatrick gave to us and sent out to everyone. We sent this out to the superintendents again today. And then we give updates on college credit earned through AP, IB, Cambridge, and dual credit. So we're giving this. The other thing that we're posing is, how do you know if students are, if they have access, connectivity, technology to be able to take their AP exams? It was announced last Friday when those will be administered in the home. They can be taken online, 45 minutes. It's a condensed version of the assessment. College Board has done a wonderful job communicating, but has the district really thought through to ensure how students will have access if they signed up for those exams? Same thing goes with dual credit classes. How is that going for students to continue that? And then it comes up with page 3 talking about the military early graduation request. SB 177 was asking for students who have who want to go on and enlist, that they be granted EHOs, the educational enhancement opportunities, days to graduate early. How will local districts establish a process for this to issue graduation diplomas? The military is also asking for transcripts as soon as possible. How does that occur? Because the military, just quite honestly, is not interested in waiting through to June or July. We're getting more information on that. Kevin could probably speak a little bit to that. And then the next question we have is, how will this information be communicated to educators, students, families, and what are effective ways to ensure transparency? And that's the structure of the guidance that we're providing. Is we're trying to be very specific about questions to consider in your setting, in the district setting, in the regional setting, that would best help districts make decisions that will help advance students. And so, you know, the discussion or the conversation around the 15 credits versus 22. Definitely appreciate the feedback from Rhonda. In all transparency, I got a lot of phone calls pushing back pretty hard against asking districts to waive to the minimum requirements because it's not all students. So again, this takes it back to the discussion we'll have around that and what we can waive, and would be happy to do that to support districts. But it really has to be a district decision based on your processes, how you handle graduation, the situation in which you're in, the connectivity and access of your students, and that is very, very unique to each district. So I will pause there and be happy to answer questions. And Rhonda is available as well, I'm sure. And if you need me to pull up her report again, I'm happy to do so. But I'll pause and let you guys make comments. But thank you for taking time to listen to us and giving the feedback to help us create these types of documents and supports for our districts. We really appreciate your support.
Amanda, do you want me to read through what's in the chats, or do you see those?
I see those. I'm going to stop sharing and then I'll hop over to the chat.
And before you, Karen, before you start that, I just wanted to do a clarification. And Amanda, I apologize if you covered that. I had to jump off real quick to take care of something. I'm back on, but the guidance reflects option 1. Even though we haven't made a formal decision about option 1 or 2, we're basically guiding districts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, we're basically guiding districts towards option 1, even though technically they could still ask the State Board of Education for a waiver to get them to option 2. Is that a fair way of describing it, Amanda?
It is, and some districts have expressed to me that they don't want us, that they personally don't want to do a blanket. Some want to do a few hardship cases. They may have a few kids who are in some unique situations. Others are saying, we'd like to go to the minimum. There was just concern about lowering expectation for all students when it's April, and most schools have systems that seniors are on track, but there's always that handful of unique situations. So it keeps coming back to don't make the decision for us or force us, give us some flexibility, but just the permission to be able to change that. So yes, Kevin, there's been a lot of conversation around that. I have not personally been asked to go to the 15, but again, we were waiting on the feedback from Rhonda, and it looks like almost like a 50-50. So definitely welcome the feedback, and we want to do what's best for districts. Absolutely. So I'm looking at some questions here. I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to go from the bottom up so I know we don't skip any. Just Rhonda says, I think the flexibility to have districts handle hardship cases individually is vital for equity. Totally agree. That's the thing that keeps me up at night. Melissa just said that everyone will appreciate the guidance in one document, input and time. Absolutely. And I will definitely share, Rhonda, if it's okay with you, we'll share the report and we'll share the guidance will come out. Absolutely. And we will make that available. I think that would be helpful for your districts as well, just to see what some of the feedback was. Then Rhonda Harmon made the comment about that the graduation decision was being left to the school boards. Guidance, ideas, and examples are always helpful. We appreciate that. That's the goal, because we know not everybody looks the same. Eric made comment about the grad ceremony, which is the next topic we're going to be digging into to give suggestions. Legally under Reagan statute, the grad ceremony is entirely that. A ceremony can happen before or after the last instructional day, totally up to local plannings. Is this correct? Entirely local decision. And Eric, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely. I think it's just to provide some guidance on some unique ways to celebrate if we're still in this position for a while. Anybody, please feel free to comment on that if I'm wrong. Stephen shared, as an FYI, we are putting a document together that shows all of our state's graduation plans and admission requirements for colleges and universities and states. We think that will help as we advise admins, counselors, and students. Completely agree, Stephen. We are always open to ideas and fresh thinking. Absolutely. Thank you. If we move, Ronnie Nolan had shared, if we move to a 15 credit hour model, would programs who offer all online performance-based instruction be able to graduate other students who may be able to complete the hours this school year earlier than perhaps their cohort? This is a particular issue in alternative schools who have robust online programs and often graduate students. Graduate students daily, or at least have the flexibility to do that. That's a great question. That was one of the concerns, actually, is that if we lower it so much, we could have lots of students graduate who probably don't need to graduate yet. This specifically, Ronnie, to alternative schools. I'm not sure. That's something I would defer help with on feedback on that, and we can get back to you if we don't have a good answer today. But that was one of the concerns for students who are in a regular setting, graduating at such a low bar, how many kids would get to pass through and aren't really prepared. How could we get info on the number of students impacted by the credit discussion? That would be a real challenge. We have common course codes, but we have 172 district policies. And even with some of the courses that are substituted, it would be a little bit of a challenge. That would be locally how we have to pull that. And that's it on the graduation. Let me go back to the bottom to make sure I haven't missed any. Let's see. Okay, back to Eric. So I think I've got the last three. I'm not sure if we can grant individual hardship cases. Wouldn't it be better for a board waiver for any students who already go beyond the new number of credits? That's fine, so as long as it is a local decision. Some actually, Eric, have hardship cases, but it could be the board goes to 22 credits. I think that's where the flexibility is out there, and Kevin and Todd, I defer, or Robin, whomever, to speak to that. It's a good question. I would have to dig into that.
Yeah, I think the hardship graduation provision is when the student meets the state minimum requirements that are set by the State Board of Education, but doesn't meet the local district minimum requirements that they have set. So that's a matter of the local board taking action to provide some level of flexibility to the superintendent to grant certain students the ability to go ahead and graduate and earn a diploma whenever they show some type of hardship situation. That's a situation that we see and have seen for several years. So I think that's a matter of the local board taking some level of action to lower their standards to those adopted by the State Board of Education.
And so if and I would just add, if the hardship though dipped down into the 22nd credit, the 21st, the 20th, down into the state board mandated, that is when you're going to get into needing a state board waiver. Todd, you agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
So David is asking the consent thought on the group at this point. David, are you referring to the number of credits? Is that what you're referring to? I just want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly.
Yeah, man, I've heard a lot of the discussion. I just want to try to get a cumulative, summative thought then of what we're considering at this point.
Well, I think, Kevin, I'm going to defer to you on this. Do you think we should probably take this to the board or ask for districts if they request the 15 credit to go below the 22? What is your recommendation on that?
I think since we're so close to a state board meeting, I think let's get the state board to weigh in on it. And then if we need to go ahead and issue the guidance this week, we'll just, put an asterisk by it that we're still kind of working through the graduation options, but here's one option, which is the one you already have in there. And let's see what the board feels about it. I don't want to encourage districts to seek waivers if our board is not comfortable with districts going down to 15 or whatever the number might be, because there is something to be said for and I can't speak for the board, but the board may feel like it may not want some students in some parts of the state to have 15 credits and some in the other parts of the state to have 22. And they may feel the exact opposite of that. I don't know, but let's take it to the board on Thursday. Go ahead and issue our guidance this week, but kind of flag it that we're still looking at other options, are going to consult with the board. But at this time, our guidance is to use the 22 and waive your local, but that we hear you with a significant portion of school districts and principals wanting to, the other option.
Thank you. There is one more statement on here that I don't want to miss. Actually, two. Rhonda Harmon says, for the lawyers, do districts need to be concerned about students who can't graduate calling into question the quality of school provided by NTI or an NTI?
So I'll take this one. I think I have to give the caveat that, of course, as an attorney for the department and the state board, I can't give legal advice to anyone other than my clients. I can provide some level of information. I understand the question to mean that perhaps a student would argue that they are unable to graduate. They did not meet the graduation requirements because they would allege that there was some lack of quality instruction that they received during this period of time. That's a question that we can look into. It's not one that I think we would anticipate broadly across the state. I think that those students who would be prevented from graduating as a result of this relatively small portion of time, when you consider their overall high school career, would be a small number of people. I think where that concern probably becomes larger is the number of students. I think where we'll see this argument more are students with disabilities who are graduated, whose parents later come back and challenge through perhaps a due process hearing whether or not that was a legitimate graduation. Of course, we have conducted superintendent webinars, both for superintendents and directors of special education, and are providing them with a lot of information and resources to ensure that the special education and related services that are provided to students with disabilities during this time, in fact, meet all of the requirements of their IEP, and that in the event when that isn't able to happen, that the district goes back to provide some level of compensatory ed to make up for that. So that's the way that we're addressing that issue for students with disabilities.
Thank you, Todd. And then there's one more, two more, sorry. Okay. Julian just said it's an FYI. So Julian, thank you for responding, and I'll definitely take that in. It's in the chat box. He said no need to read it, just an FYI. So I appreciate your feedback on that, and we are always looking to improve and be timely. Let's see, we got another comment. It says, would you be able to put the two options for graduation requirements that have been discussed, including specific feedback and concerns received that are related to each option, in a summary document? Yes, we can do that. We can provide the feedback on that. That's not a problem. We can add that. And we can actually, if we did that, actually, we could also include, I might want to wait until the board gives feedback on the 15 credits, because they would have to be willing to waive that. So, but I'm happy to pull that summary together and release it when it's appropriate. Absolutely. I think that's it, Karen.
All right. Well, Amanda, you're still on deck. Our next item is the civics test update.
Okay, so I kind of mentioned that. Thank you, Karen. I kind of mentioned that with the guidance. So thanks to your all's feedback, and Todd and Kevin and Lieutenant Governor, Secretary Coleman, we were able to get that waived for this year. So students who don't have that completed don't have to complete that at this time. Honestly, that can be waived and come back next year, and it should not prohibit a student from graduating. So that has officially been put into an executive order, and that guidance will have the waiver linked to it. So you're able to read that and have that in writing if there's any question.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. Our last item is on communication, and I'm going to share a couple things with all of you. So all right, let me know when you can see my desktop. Can anybody see that yet?
Not yet, Karen.
Not yet.
Let me make sure I did it correctly.
Starting to come up, looks like.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So this is the document that Brooke Gill talked about last week in our meeting that we have collaborated on. They have their own resource where they're sending out information and resources to various different audiences. And they've added to that this district audience. And so this is what we helped put together and what we would like for everyone here to help us share out. And this is just the resources that we talked about in our last meeting. So you can see, first of all, that we have in the big section here, our communication department is asking for folks to share their NTI experiences. And so there's a picture here of a teacher teaching through a glass window. So by using the hashtag MyNTIKY, we're hoping to get lots of other pictures and a brief description of that. And so this will change from week to week with that. We also have a link here to the education continuation task force, an article that was put out through a media advisory. So this will click through to that. And then NTI, so the best practices that David Cook shared with us last week. If you click here, that PDF, and I'm not going to click on them because my slow connection, it wouldn't be pretty. So anyway, but it was the best practices PDF that David Cook shared with us last week that we'll pull up there. And then also the graduation requirements. There was another article in the Kentucky Teacher that summarized our discussion. So that's what we'll pull up when you click on this link. And then David Cook also shared out NTI guidance, emergency NTI guidance. He's doing that on a weekly or maybe even several times a week, putting out new guidance on NTI. And so the latest PDF is shared here. And then finally, our last link is to the Department of Education COVID-19 resource page. And so that this is what we're asking that you all help us share out. So we're going to push this out, and then for all of you to share it out as well to kind of get the message out about what this group is talking about would be really helpful. The other thing that I want to share, David, if you can tell me if you can see this page, I've pulled up the advisory group page from KDE's website.
There it is. Yep.
Okay. So when you go to the KDE web page, you'll see the Commissioner of Education, and just mouse over on that and you'll see advisory groups. This is the page that comes up from there. What we've done is we've added Education Continuation Task Force as one of our advisory groups. So you can come here, and on this main page, you can see all of the different advisory groups, the calendar of when each of them are meeting. If you click on Education Continuation Task Force, then you see our purpose statement, how often we're meeting, the legal disclosure about the fact that we're not making decisions, just getting feedback. And over on the right-hand side, the agenda for each of our meetings, the summary of the meetings, and then there's also a recording. So you can click on each one of these and get to the recording for each one of the meetings that we're having. So I wanted to share that with you. You can feel free to share this out as well. Anything that was shared on the meetings that we're having, these virtual meetings, all those resources are also on there underneath each one of the dates. Okay. And then the last thing that we wanted to talk about was maybe changing the frequency of these meetings. We've been having them every Monday. This is our third meeting now, every Monday. And we were wanting to get some feedback from all of you as to whether we should move this to an every other week session. So comments on that?
And of course, you know, if things change, as we know they can very quickly with this, you know, we get updates from the governor nightly and public health, and things can change quickly. We will obviously reserve the right to ask you all back together in case we needed a meeting in between the every other week. But I think we've really covered a lot of the hot topics the last 3 meetings, and I think it's, unless something else comes up, I think we can have another one on the 19th instead of on the I think it would be the 19th. I'm getting my dates mixed up. The 13th and the 20th, I guess it would be. So we would skip next week's meeting.
Okay, I'm seeing some positive comments over in the chat section. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Nancy, Amy, Mary. Thank you very much. All right, looks like we're getting positive feedback on that. So we'll go ahead and do that. That's the end of our agenda. Kevin, we had talked about for the next meeting, talking about virtual options to assist with end of year activities.
Yes, we're going to be, we're going to continue with our advisory committees, our the advisory councils that the commissioner has. The first one, or one, I think we have the first one coming up on the 14th with the students. We've already met with them early on in the COVID-19 time period, but we want to meet with them again, and we're going to continue on with the other advisories, the principals, teachers, superintendents, but particularly with the students, we want to hear what they think and what they are hearing from their peers, and maybe even peers that they're talking to in other states about how do we honor some of the rites of passage in senior year and that kind of thing virtually. Obviously, those aren't decisions for the department to make, but we certainly want to be a vehicle to have that conversation, pass ideas along. I know one of the options in the KASA survey talked about a virtual graduation. It'd be great if we had, I know we probably have platforms that could already do that, but it'd be great if a vendor for free or another entity for free develop some kind of an easy platform for those types of ceremonies, specifically for graduations. I know that one of the other options was a drive-through type graduation. So, you know, this is an unprecedented time, and so we all need to be thinking creatively and try to honor students and try to make this as so they can have some of the same experiences that they thought they were going to have and that their friends from last year had, and hopefully that the rising juniors will have next year.
All right, thank you, Kevin. That's all we had on the agenda for today.
The only closing comment I have is that Tony, I need you to confirm, because I couldn't find the email you sent me, but we had the announcement by Ms. Crum from KET earlier that the KET forum was tonight at 8 o'clock. I believe that has been postponed. Tony,
Yeah,
can you?
Kevin.
Yes,
Oh,
that's correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I was raising my hand over here in the corner. I was going to say I received word while we were on the call that has been canceled for tonight. We hope to postpone until April 20th, but it's unforeseen circumstances. So we'll get that word out to this group as soon as we know more. Again, as we said, things are changing daily. So I appreciate your all's flexibility.
Just got off the phone with Brene Shaw, so absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone, the presenters, but also everyone on the task force and other guests. It's just been an amazing effort doing all this virtually and just seeing so many positive items on social media about what all is going on around the state. It's a proud a time to be proud to be a Kentuckian, and we're rising to the occasion, and it's taking everybody and every organization to do this. So I want to thank you for that. So everyone have a safe rest of the afternoon, and we will, as we're saying now, we will see you online.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.